Hello and welcome to the Fairbanks Year-Round Podcast. If you came expecting the Summit Realty Group podcast, you are in the right area. This is going to be a pretty short episode, kind of explaining a lot of changes that we have made. So first, I want to start off by apologizing for the long absence that we had since the end of 2023 from the Summit Realty Group podcast. We never intended for it to be that long, for one. And there was no option of us not coming back, just so you know. But we had a lot of changes. I know I gave a short warning at the end of our last podcast, like, hey, there's going to be a little time off. Of course, January, some vacations happen, and Christmas and all that stuff coming up. So we didn't go into detail on that, and that's because Nick and I did not have a very clear idea of what all the changes would be. That was one of our big things that we needed to work through. So this podcast is kind of, here are the changes. Here's what to expect in the future from this podcast. And yeah, so let's get started. So the very first thing, I have notes here, so I may look down at them to see because I don't want to forget anything. But Nick, you may notice, is not here. I would say he was very much the main host of the Summit Realty Group podcast, and I was, I don't want to say lesser, but I didn't guide and lead the podcast as often. However, it is decided that we're kind of split up, as you might say, and it was because he was a terrible person to work with. I've not enjoyed any time that I've spent with Nick, and I want to be very clear. No, I'm joking. But seriously, it was very amicable. We talked about it more and more, and with any business, you have to decide where you're going to spend your time. For Nick, the podcast was not the direction that he wanted to go. He did want me to be very clear that he loved doing the podcast, and it was a lot of fun. But again, he's got other priorities. For myself, I started listening to podcasts maybe, 15 years ago. And I remember when I discovered them, they were somewhat new, and I was so shocked that they were free. And I have been listened to literally thousands and thousands of hours of podcasts almost every single day. Since then, I've listened to at least one podcast. So I've always loved them, always wanted to do one. And I've done quite a few in the past, and I've never really done much with them. I would say the Summit Realty Group podcast for me was the most successful. We had dozens of listeners. I wish it was hundreds or thousands, but we'll for sure to get going that way. So I didn't want to stop this. We discussed it more, and I was like, hey, do you mind if I carry it on? Of course, we're going to cover here with some changes and whatnot. And he's like, absolutely. It's not something I want to go forward with at this time. However, Nick will probably be on as a guest. So that's something to look forward to. We're still friends. We still work together. It was very amicable. And as they say, a mutual breakup, which who knows how true those are. The name. So the Fairbanks Year-Round instead of the Summit Realty Group podcast. So we may have discussed this a little bit in the past, but I want to be very clear. We started as a Summit Realty Group podcast with the intention to talk about real estate sales, real estate intelligence, the state of the market. And Nick and I did that for a few months, and we got bored of just talking about real estate. We love real estate and we love doing it, but I think a lot of people, if you're not buying a house, you probably are not wanting to think about it so much. So we then switched to having more guests, and it became a very organic growth of like, what is this going to be? And where it ended up and where I'm going to continue it on from is more of a podcast about people who live in Fairbanks, people who want to live in Fairbanks, and people who just want to know more about the area in general. So that's kind of the listener base I think that we've been growing. And that's exactly what we're going to do in the future. We're going to bring in business owners, just like we talked to before, talk about their business, talk about the community, talk about events. We want to bring in people from the community with special stories or whatever it may be. So the Summit Realty Group podcast name, I don't feel like fit the content of what we're going to be doing, and it hasn't fit for a long time. We were wanting to change the name probably 3-4 months ago, and we just never did the whole rebrand. So now it is Fairbanks Year-Round. I think that encompasses what we're talking about, and it's on the little logo here, which is quite fun. And I think we have a tagline, it's thriving in Alaska. It's just, again, it's about life in Fairbanks, life in Alaska, and I'm super, super jazzed to do it. So that is the new name. The next thing I want to talk about is the upgraded studio. So hopefully you're noticing, if you're listening, a better sound quality. I did get a few complaints from listeners on the last podcast. We're just a couple of amateurs and we were definitely improving, but I've put the effort in. I hope it comes through to have better sound quality. Of course, got mics, got these fancy stands, which I'm actually very, very excited about. It makes me feel like a podcaster for real. This is not the direction you'll normally be seeing. There's going to be someone across the desk, and we'll have a different layout for when I have a guest on. The next thing is, if you're watching this, you already know, but if you're not watching this, is we will have video now. It used to be just audio. So we're going to have video, upgraded sound quality, and then lastly, I brought in an executive producer, my wife, and she's sitting in the corner over there smirking because I'm talking about her. Oh, now she's giggling. And she is basically watching sound levels. She is, again, hopefully increasing the sound quality as much as possible. Again, still amateur, still figuring things out, so give us a little leeway there, I suppose. But really want to put in the effort to make this as high quality as feasible for a small business doing something. This almost feels like something on the side of that business, but I think it's very cohesive with being a real estate agent, because again, I'm here to help you buy or sell a house, and in that time I want to be the one that's training you on those things. But in all the other times, I want to be the one helping you love Fairbanks more, basically. And we can get more detailed on that, but that's the overall of what this podcast, what I'm aiming for. So that is the studio. So now the content. What can you expect in the future? So first, it's very much going to be interviews still, just like I already said with the name change topic. We are looking to bring in local people. I'm sure I will do some real estate related topics, and maybe I'll do a solo recording every now and again on those for people, because I do think it's important to the Fairbanks area what real estate is doing. But generally, there's going to be a guest, and we're going to talk about Fairbanks. We're going to talk about business. We're going to talk about community. We're going to talk about cool life stories, things that have happened, hunting, whatever it may be. We're going to do that. The time of the podcast is going to change. So Nick was very much a big believer in 45 minutes to an hour or less. And of course, we could end sooner if we ran out of something to talk about. And that is like 100% a good thing to do. I hope this does not sound like I'm bashing on anything. However, I am I want this to feel a lot more like a conversation and not an interview so much. So it's people talking about interesting things, and the conversation will end when it's no longer interesting. So if that's in 10 minutes, which would be, I'd be kind of feel bad for the guest if I cut them off in 10 minutes. Or if it's 2 hours, it will be what it'll be. I give you permission to turn the thing off whenever you want or skip whenever you like. So if it ends up being something that's too long, you're not interested in, don't worry about it. You don't have to, you don't have to listen to the whole thing. But I think when I personally, as a big fan of podcasts, when I find a podcast and I'm very interested in the subject matter, the timing, of course, I want them to be longer. And so I'm going to kind of lean into that on this. Again, very relaxed. If you're a guest coming on, most people left previously saying, hey, that was a lot of fun. And that's what we're going for. I'm not looking to bring people on and bash their business or make a big stink about anything. We're just kind of having fun talking about the area. And again, going for a much more positive, like, here's why you'd want to live in Fairbanks. I do think it's the greatest city in the world, which a lot of people would disagree with, I know. But I love it a lot, and I want other people to see why. And this is kind of an argument for that. And then, I guess the overall vibe, which I've already kind of covered, is just relax and conversational. And you can tune in if you like. And I want you to feel, as a listener or a viewer, like you're in the room listening to a nice conversation with a couple Alaskans. And I think that's it. So that's the state of the podcast. This is a short one here, and we'll be back next week. At the time of the recording, I don't know who the guest is going to be, but it's going to be a good one, guaranteed. All right, I'll see you. Thank you.